Hello, my stunning angel besties. Welcome back to my channel, or welcome if you're new. My name is Rachel. How are we doing? In today's video, I'm going to be talking about the 10 books that I read in the month of August, what I thought of them, what I rated them, and I'm really excited because in the month of August, I had very high highs and I also had very low lows for my reading. So I feel like I've got the full gamut here. It's gonna be pretty interesting. So let's get straight into it. So first up, the first book that I read in the month of August was Heir of Fire. This is my third time reading this book. I am rereading the entire Throne of Glass series and I'm having a great time. Heir of Fire is an automatic 5-star for me. I absolutely love this book. I love what this book represents and where it takes the series. The series definitely takes a turn once you get to this book and it's really exciting. We also have the introduction of 2 new very important characters in this book and it feels so good to be reading them. Everything is right in the world now that they are in the story and I had a really good time with this. Personally for me, Heir of Fire, Queen of Shadows, and Empire of Storms, it is the perfect 3-book run in the series. It's my favorite part of the series and I'm just really happy to be in this section. So this was great, 5 stars. The next book I read in August was The Martian by Andy Weir. You guys know I won't ever shut up about it, that I read Project Hail Mary earlier this year, also by Andy Weir. It was amazing, life-changing, one of my new all-time favorites, and I knew that I wanted to pick up his other book, which is The Martian. I've heard a lot of great things about this. This was also adapted into a movie, which I have not seen yet, but I read this, I listened to this on audio, and it was once again absolutely fantastic. I ended up giving it 5 stars, which felt so good. It feels different to Project Hail Mary, and the reasons why I love it are different, but in this book, we are following a lone astronaut who ends up getting abandoned on Mars. Something goes wrong with his mission, with the other astronauts on this mission with him. They are able to escape and go back to Earth, but he is stuck. So he essentially has to learn how to survive on Mars until he can get help. And it's kind of told in this sort of diary format of him wanting to keep track of everything that's going on, just in case if he dies, people will be able to know what it was like for him. And then we are also flashing back to Earth when NASA realizes the situation and what they're trying to do to fix it. I really liked that component. I liked having his perspective, but then also all of his coworkers, all of NASA trying to figure out what to do on Earth and how their 2 storylines converged. I love the humor and wit that Andy Weir puts into his characters, and that was absolutely no exception in The Martian. This book has a really fantastic main character who was super funny and relatable. I find this writing style to just be so addicting. I truly could not put it down. The audiobook was wonderful. I was listening to it constantly and I really liked it. Project Hail Mary is still my number 1, but this is still a very strong 5-star just for different reasons and I really loved it. 10 out of 10 recommend. The next book that I picked up in the month of August is The House in the Cerulean Sea by TJ Klune. So this was my first TJ Klune book and I've had his books like on my radar for so long. I always knew that I wanted to read them. I've heard a lot of great things and so I decided to pick up this book in August and I was so happy that I did. This book was so wholesome, so pure, so whimsical, and I had a really great time reading it. So this book follows our main character, Linus. He is a caseworker for magical youth, and so he goes to these different homes and orphanages and makes sure that everything is up to code. He ends up getting assigned to this very interesting place, this house near the Cerulean Sea, and meets a lot of very interesting children and their caretakers. I was transported immediately in this book. The writing style was very gripping early on. Once again, I had so much fun with this. I see why people love this so much. It was really sweet. There was a lot of really wonderful bonding, friendship, learning about these different children and what they've been through and who they are. I just thought that this was a really sweet and wholesome book. I did end up giving it 4 stars. I really enjoyed myself and I can't really pinpoint why it's not a 5-star, but it's just not for me. I had a good time, but it just doesn't give me that overwhelming 5-star feeling. But I thought it was really cute and I had a really good time and I love the relationship between Linus and Arthur. It was very sweet and I think really well developed. So this was a very strong 4-star for me. All right, so the next book that I read in the month of August, I read it on my Kindle and that was The Book of Asriel by Amber Nicole. So this is a fantasy romance that I actually picked up last year. I read the first 100 pages and I just put it down. I wasn't super gripped in the story. I wasn't super engaged. I wasn't like, oh my god, I'm hating this, but I wasn't in the mood for it and I picked up something else. But the audiobook came out pretty recently and I was like, you know, I kind of want to give this book another shot because it has really glowing reviews and I see a lot of people talk about it, and also I've seen a lot of people talk about the sequel that recently came out and I just want to know. I wanted to give it another shot. So I did pick up the audiobook and then read along on my Kindle, and I actually ended up enjoying this book a lot more than I thought I would, especially because I kind of DNF'd it early on. I didn't know how I was going to feel. But basically the premise of the Book of Asriel is our main character's name is Diana. She's kind of a weapon for this very powerful being, and her and all of the people that she works with, they're searching for this Book of Asriel, which will have a lot of power, really help her master kind of take over the world. But she ends up kind of begrudgingly teaming up with this god who is also a king, who has kind of been just laying low, doesn't want anything to do with his kingly duties or being a god, but the 2 of them have to team up to find this Book of Asriel in order to save the world and keep everyone safe. There is major enemies to lovers in in this book. I will say that was probably my favorite part of it. They're really enemies in the beginning. They really do not like each other and treat each other very poorly, but slowly the romance develops and there's a lot of twists and turns. So I did really like this book. I gave it a 3.5-star rating though, so it wasn't an overwhelming new favorite, but I'm definitely going to pick up the second book because I do want to see what's going to happen. Kind of my issue with it is, number one, it is extremely long. I think it's 600 or 700 pages, and it was just a lot. There's a lot of dense world building, which I just personally had a hard time sticking with the story at moments and losing interest a little bit, but I did like the characters and the romance and the dynamic. I want to see what happens next, but I just think it was a very long and dense first book, so I'll be curious to pick up book 2. I hope that I like it better. I would love to know if you have read book 2. It's been out for a few months. What did you think of it in comparison to the first book? But I liked it. I don't know if I necessarily recommend it to everyone, but I do see a lot of wonderful reviews about the book. I just think that it needed to be a little shorter for me, but I did enjoy myself and I am going to continue on with the series. The next book that I read in the month of August, I also read this on my Kindle, and this was Court of Blood and Bindings by Lisette Marshall, I believe is her name. And this is a fae fantasy romance. Our main character is a human girl, but she does have some magic in her. She's not really aware of it because her family has always told her to keep it hidden, because in the human lands that could be very problematic, cause a lot of issues for her. But her land ends up getting decimated and she ends up being kidnapped by this dark, murderous fae warrior, and he ends up taking her to the Fae Isles, and the two of them have to team up because the type of magic that she has is actually very advantageous to this Fae warrior's cause. So it is enemies to lovers, and the two of them do a lot of training sequences, and our main character learns a lot more about her powers. I did enjoy this book, but I gave it 3 stars. The reason why is it's just not doing anything special for me. It does have kind of that typical fantasy romance storyline, which I don't have a problem with that depending on how it's written and how the character dynamics are, the dialogue, things like that. And I just think that this book was like perfectly fine, but nothing special. It's not really memorable. Nothing really stuck out to me that I was like, ooh, I really like this writing, or ooh, this character feels very different. I just don't really think it's doing anything different for me. So it's a 3-star. I'm not going to continue on with the series, but I did enjoy myself. The next book that I read in the month of August was Foxglove by Adeline Grace. So this is the sequel to Belladonna. It just came out, I think August 23rd, I want to say, and I picked it up the day that it came out. I was really excited to read it, but I have to say, I was a little bit disappointed by this book. It didn't live up to Belladonna for me. There's a few reasons for that. If you do not know what the series is about, it follows our main character, Signa Farrow. Signa has been followed by death her whole life, and people around her seem to die very mysteriously. Death is actually a very attractive, brooding man who Signa develops a bit of a relationship with, but there's also a bit of a murder mystery plot in the first book, and also Signa discovering kind of her own powers and why death follows her. So it's definitely a gothic paranormal romance with a bit of murder mystery. The first book is really good, really fantastic. The atmosphere is really great. The writing is really beautiful, and the dynamic between Signa and Death is really fantastic. And I think for a YA book, it's really strong. I really enjoyed it. So I was very excited to pick up this book as it is the sequel. We're continuing on with Signa and Death's story. So I had a couple issues. Number one, Death really takes a backseat in this book, in my opinion. He is not at the forefront. He is not as important to the story as he was in book 1. And I am here for Signa and Death. Like, that is why I am reading this series. I love them in book 1. And he is still there, but he's just not as present or important in this book. And that was sad to me because I wanted to see more of them. We also have introductions of new characters, particularly Fate becomes a very important character in this book. And I'm just not super interested in him as a character. I don't really find him compelling, found him annoying at times. And just like overall, I'm not super into that storyline. I can kind of see where the third book and the finale, Wisteria, is going. I think I am going to read it just so I can like complete the trilogy, but it's not a direction that I find myself super interested in. And so that is a little bit disappointing. I think the first book is super strong, absolutely worth a read, but the second book I think just fell flat for me. And I just think the lack of death and the addition of other characters that I'm not as interested in makes me a little bit disappointed. So I gave this a 3.5 star. The writing is still beautiful, the atmosphere is great, but it just does not live up to Belladonna. All right, the next book that I read in the month of August was The Stars Are Dying by Chloe C. Peñaranda. This is a celestial fantasy romance. Our two main characters are Estrella and Night. Estrella is a girl who has a very interesting life. She doesn't remember most of it. She only remembers the last 5 years, and she has been unfortunately kept at this guild. She is locked away by this abusive man that has taken her in, and she starts to get visited by this almost like apparition of this really handsome guy named Night. But also sometimes he will appear to her in person. It's very confusing, kind of the dynamic between them in the beginning, but they're really drawn to each other, and her and Night start communicating. Estrella also ends up entering this competition that is run by a tyrannical king. In this world, there are vampires that go around killing humans, humans. And so if she competes in this competition that this king has set up, she can get protection from those vampires. So we kind of have two things going on here. Estrella not really understanding her past and where she's from, her family, who she is. She has this dynamic with Night, who is this being who is visiting her and talking to her, and then also taking part in that competition. I really did not like this book. I gave it 2 stars. I found this to be one of the most confusing books I have ever read because of the writing. I personally think that the writing is extremely convoluted. I feel like it is flowery writing for flowery writing's sake, but I think that the execution of the story and the plot and dialogue suffered a lot because I just think that a lot of things in this book don't really make sense. I was having to reread paragraphs several times. I was really having to go back and be like, okay, is this me? Am I not understanding what is going on here? I just think that the story suffered because of the writing style. And I also found the dynamic between Night and Estrella to just be not like insta-love, but I feel like it was very poorly developed. I really think that we were supposed to get on board for Night right away, but I just feel like we didn't learn enough about him early on for me to do that. And then, I mean, I just found the whole thing like very confusing. I finished the book and I still have questions that I feel like are very important to be answered for understanding the story. I really don't have anything positive to say about this book. I'm very disappointed because I really like the idea of this story. I think that the story is there, but it just needs a ton of polishing, and I did not enjoy it. So it's a 2-star read and probably going to be one of my most disappointing reads of the year. All right, the next book that I read in the month of August, I'm very excited about. It is Heavenly Bodies by Imani Iru. This is a 5-star fantasy romance. I am saying that right off the bat. This is one of my new all-time favorite fantasy romances. I'm really excited to pick up book 2. I need you guys to read this, okay? This is a really well done celestial fantasy romance. It is enemies to lovers. Our main character, Alara, she is from a kingdom called Astaria, I want to say it's called. It reminds me like of the Night Court, to be totally honest with you. It's very dark and shadow magic is a very big thing. Our girl Alara is a shadow mommy and she is a wielder of shadow magic, and she also has other type of magical powers. She ends up seeking asylum in Helion, which is kind of like a sun court. So it's complete total opposite of her. Everyone there has like light magic, fire magic, and she ends up getting to stay at the king's castle with his very handsome son, Enzo. But they only let her do that if she is willing to train her magical powers and become the weapon that they know that she can be, because there is a star/god looking for her, wanting to capture her. And so the king says, hey, if you're gonna be here, you need to be able to protect yourself so that our kingdom does not suffer. So Enzo, who is the prince of this kingdom, he ends up agreeing to train her, and the two of them get to know each other through training. They definitely butt heads in the beginning, but they slowly fall in love, and it's a really, really fantastic story. The enemies to lovers is really good. The tension between them is fantastic. The banter is 10 out of 10. The romance does stay at the forefront of the story the entire time, but also I really loved the fantasy plot. There's a lot of politics that go on. There's a lot of scheming. There's a lot of you don't know whose side people are on. There is this addition of these stars, as I mentioned, essentially like gods, and they're represented by each sign of the zodiac, and their addition to this book is really fascinating, and you don't know who is good and who is bad. And the ending of this book was absolutely crazy. I had no idea where the story was going. I had no idea how things were going to end, but the last 100 pages is absolutely insane, all gas, no brakes, and really amazing world building is happening throughout the book, but especially at the end. I'm just so excited to read the next book because of how things went, and I think it's really strong. I also think the author's writing is really beautiful. I really, really love the imagery that is in this book. The author really takes the time to focus on the different lands, what they look like, what magic powers they have there, and it's a really beautifully told story. Alara and Enzo are a new favorite fictional couple for me, and I think it's really strong. This is right up there with like all of my favorite fantasy romances. Definitely think you guys should pick it up. Really, really strong 5-star. All right, and then I'm so excited to talk about these next 2 books. So I started the Red Rising series by Pierce Brown. So I read Red Rising and it was amazing. I've had so many people recommend this book to me, and I've always known like I'm gonna love that. I know I'm gonna love that, and I loved it. It was so fantastic. First of all, the writing was amazing. Immediately, I loved it. I was into it. I really, really like the way that Pierce Brown writes dialogue, and I really like the way that he describes our characters. I just found it to be very intriguing right off the bat. If you don't know what Red Rising is about, it follows our main character, Darrow. Darrow is a red, and in this world, essentially, we are trying to make Mars habitable for future generations, and there's a bit of a caste system going on. So there are golds, which are like the upper echelon, the 1%ers. They are in charge of everyone, and then there are the reds, and the reds are essentially enslaved enslaved to the gold, and they are forced to make Mars habitable. That is their task, and they are told that, you know, they're making these great sacrifices for future generations. And there are some Reds who are suspicious of this, particularly Darrow's wife Io. She really wants Darrow to rise up and, you know, make a statement and rebel, but he just wants to live his life and feed his family, and he doesn't really want anything to do with that. But tragedy strikes in Darrow's life, and it kind of forces him into a situation where he learns that the Golds have been lying to the Reds, and they have essentially just been enslaving them and working them to death. And so Darrow decides to infiltrate the Golds and become one of them so that he can destroy them from the inside. And that truly, like, that is so much, but it's just the tip of the iceberg. This book is described as Hunger Games in space, and that is what happens. It gets very brutal and very intense, and the way that this book ended is wild. Like, I knew it was gonna end that way, but just the gravity of the situation is just so intense. I feel like the second book, Golden Sun, is gonna be really, really great, and I'm just so excited to see where things go. I absolutely loved seeing the character development that happened with Darrow from the beginning of the book to the end. So much happened in this book. It's really not even that long, and I just feel like we saw so much growth and so much change, and the world building was so well done. So I really loved this book. I am officially calling myself a sci-fi girly because I love Andy Weir and I love Pierce Brown's books, and I really liked the science elements of this book. I just think this is such a cool series. I cannot wait to continue on with it. It was one of those books that I instantly got excited about, which made me really, really happy. I did end up giving this book, though, a 4.5-star rating. It wasn't quite a 5-star. My only reason for that is there was a ton of action and fighting in this book, and I just feel like maybe we could have done without like 1 or 2 chapters of that, just because the pacing for me, like, there were moments where I was just like, okay, like, I get why this is here, but I just feel like we probably could have shortened this and it would have been perfect pacing for me. But I still really loved it. It's not a huge complaint. That's just kind of a personal thing, but I really liked this and I'm very excited to continue on with it. All right, and then the very last book that I read in the month of August was Jade War by Fonda Lee. I finally continued on with the Green Bone Saga, you guys. I'm mad at myself for waiting this long because this was probably my favorite read of August. I mean, it's hard. I feel like Heavenly Bodies, this, and The Martian were all like super strong, perfect 5 stars for me, but this stuck out in such a way that I'm still thinking about it. If you don't know what the Green Bone Saga is, it is an adult fantasy. I guess it's kind of like an urban fantasy because it does take place in sort of a modern day urban city setting. In this world, jade is a very hot commodity. It is a power source. It is a magic source. People are absolutely obsessed with getting it. And we have warring families and clans who kind of control the amount of jade in the city and who it's given to and all of that. It definitely has like Godfather, Soprano vibes. I think there's a lot of family drama. There is a lot of mafia-esque relations that are happening between the different clans, and it's just such a rich world. My favorite thing about this series is there are multiple POVs. I think there's like 5 or 6, and every single one is so interesting and so jam-packed. So much is going on. There are so many moving pieces in this series and in this book. You never know what is going to happen next, and Fonda Lee can be very ruthless. There was definitely a lot of shocking moments in this book, but I think that she does a really great job of writing morally gray characters, like truly morally gray, where you absolutely love a character, but then they do something that you're just like, why did you do that? But then you love them still as they keep going on, and then they do something really great. I think that she is just a master at that. I think she really, really handles morally gray characters well. I really, really love Hilo. He is my favorite character in this book, but I also really love his wife, Wen. She is everything to me, but I truly think that all the characters are really strong in this book, and I love it. I love the family drama. I love the relationship drama. I love the issues between the clans, and I just think this is a really cool and special series, and it's just not like anything else that I'm reading. You know, it's not a typical fantasy series, and that's what I really like about it, and I just think it's so cool. So this is a very, very, very strong 5-star for me. I am going to be picking up the finale Jade Legacy soon, and I am so scared but so excited, and I have no idea how everything is going to be wrapped up because, as I said, there's so many moving pieces, but this is definitely going to become one of my all-time favorite series. The first book and the second book were 5 stars, and I feel like Jade Legacy is going to be really great, which is the finale. It's definitely going to hold a very special place in my heart. All right, friends, so that is going to be it for me. Those are the 10 books that I read in the month of August. I would love to know down in the comments what was the best book that you read in August. Let me know what you thought of it and what you rated it. If you made it to this point in the video and you wanted to let me know, go ahead and leave. Let's see here. I have a lot of celestial things going on. Go ahead and leave a planet or stars or the moon or just anything celestial. Please make sure that you're following me on Instagram and Goodreads. They are always linked down below. I really appreciate that you watched this video. I hope that you are having a fantastic day. I love you guys so, so much, and I will catch you all in the next one.